talk more about these ideas. And I want to get to all of that in a moment. But let's begin with your overall impressions of the State of the Nation address last night. Are we on the right track?
Well, I think it was a missed opportunity. That would be my overall view. Lots of nice-sounding words. The president's a good orator. But I don't think he told us we were going to make tough choices, but he then didn't make any. So I think it was a missed opportunity and it's not going to help the country in moving towards the growth and investment we desperately need.
You're quite against what you call a high-skilled and capital-intensive employment concept. Why is that so detrimental to our unemployment picture in particular?
Well, for the last 20, 25 years, we've chosen an approach. The government has chosen an approach to our economy which you can characterize as high-skilled, high-wage. They wanted employees to get higher wages, and they thought this would help grow the economy and a better future for everybody. And it just hasn't worked, and it hasn't worked anywhere else in the world. If you've got people who are low-skilled, the vast majority of South Africans come out of schools that are not very good. They don't get a great education at all, and they often live in communities or households where nobody has worked and they don't have a job. So this is not a high-skilled population. We have to, of course, grow every part of our economy, from the cutting-edge companies, but we also need to open up space for labor-intensive manufacturing, for the kind of sectors in the economy that in every other country have grown millions of jobs, which are available for first-time employees, and they can learn on the job. And that's what we are stopping in this country.
The reality, though, is that unskilled or low-skilled, as the majority of South Africans are, these are South Africans that live in a country where the cost of living is terribly high, so they do need to earn a decent living wage. So how do you balance that with what you're saying should be lower paying jobs, which essentially would just be a means of getting people in employment, but not necessarily paying them well enough to improve the quality of life?
Look, we first of all have to make the big choice. What the big choice is it better to be employed or unemployed? I think unemployment is devastating for people, and many of our younger people do not get a job until they're in their 30s, if they're lucky. So I think that's the worst situation to be in, and it's terrible for them, for their families, for the country. If you can get your foot into a factory job, not a great job, this gets you into a working environment and you learn all sorts of things on the job, and you've got a chance of moving up the ladder. And of course I would like everybody to earn more, but this isn't going to happen. And the more we talk about, Trevor Manuel once put it, the more adjectives we put in front of the word jobs, the less jobs you'll get. So you and I can discuss what we'd really like in a perfect world, but that is not how economies work. And unless we get more and more South Africans into jobs, even though they're not fantastic jobs, they're better than being unemployed. And they give you a chance to learn skills, and you might start by making my T-shirt, but very soon you could be supervising other people making T-shirts. And one day I could make your shirt, and maybe one day I can make the president's suit. Mm-hmm. So there's an upward trajectory, whereas if you're unemployed, you're absolutely nowhere and you're going nowhere.
I can hear the unions, though, and saying what you are advancing is a pro-business, pro-capital policy in essence, and that really at the end of the day, the only people who would benefit are those who are taking home the profits.
Well, I disagree with that. I think if you talk to any employer who has offered a job publicly in the last 10 to 15 years, they are overwhelmed with applications. So let workers and potential workers vote with their feet. Nobody's forcing them to take a job, but they're desperate for employment. Think of it this way. Over the last 10 years, we had 2 million more young people joining the labour force, but 500,000 less people in employment. This is devastating. So we have one of the highest youth unemployment rates in the world, and partly, I would argue, it's because there is this view that we only want decent jobs in South Africa. So we give incentives to capital. We give incentives to you buying a machine rather than hiring more workers. And look at Ethiopia. They're one of the poorest countries in the world, and a few years ago they decided we are going to open ourselves up to foreign investment in factories for very low, unbelievably low wage jobs. But this is something, and it's better than what people had before.
I want to get your view on something else. We are covering here on ENCA the news coming from MultiChoice, over 2,000 of its walk-in centre and call centre staff being given retrenchment notices, a negotiation process now set to continue. This all having to do with the fact that more and more of us are now using our computers or our cell phones to access the services that they would render. Given the setup of our economy and just the skills mix, is there any intervention available to the state to stave off, for as long as possible really, the advances in technology that will ultimately wipe out entire industries?
Look, the most important thing is to make South Africa a more attractive place for investors. Not because they're the only people who count, but because without investment from domestic and foreign companies, our economy is in deep trouble. So in the last quarter, we lost 237,000 jobs. At the end of the Jobs Summit last year, we were told we would get 275,000 jobs in a year. There's no hope of doing that. So you can't hold back the automation that's taking place in certain parts of the economy, and we have to be smart about it. First and foremost, we have to fix our education system. I am in favor of thinking about how we're going to help people transition from the kind of jobs that they're doing now, more manual, let's call them, to a more automated sort of situation.
Are companies doing enough to make that happen?
This doesn't work. Well, this doesn't work very effectively in much richer countries in South Africa, but I think it's certainly worth thinking about how one can do it and what the responsibilities are of the company and of the state. The state's run out of money, so it's not just 2,000 today, it's the 237,000, and it's going to grow. So we're in this terrible situation where on the one hand we're not providing jobs, entry-level jobs for people with very few skills through no fault of their own. On the other hand, we're starting to see people losing jobs because of automation, and you and I choose to do things differently. We have to get much faster growth. That's the most important thing.
All right.
Secondly, it has to be much more labor-intensive growth, and it has to be jobs that many people in government and the unions are saying aren't good enough for South Africa. And I'm saying, gee, I think they're a lot better than unemployment, and they lead to better things. And those firms that start off with, low-skill manufacturing firms, very soon they're assembling cell phones, and they're doing electronic things, and they're helping the country and its firms become more sophisticated to deal with this automation revolution.
And you could clearly talk about this subject all night, but for now, thank you so much for coming in. Stand by for us.